Joan of Arc versus William Wallace, a saint against a savage. A French peasant girl who heard the voice of God versus a Scottish knight who answered the call of freedom. Both were unlikely heroes, catapulted from obscurity to lead their people against overwhelming odds. But who was the more effective leader, whose legacy had a greater impact? Today, we're diving deep into this epic historical showdown. Let's set the stage. Late medieval Europe was a brutal place. For France, it was the 100 Years' War, a seemingly endless conflict with England. The French were on the ropes, their morale shattered, their rightful king uncrowned. For Scotland, it was the wars of Scottish independence. Their king was dead, their nobles were squabbling, and the English king, Edward I, known as Longshanks, saw his chance to bring Scotland under his heel for good. Into these desperate situations, our two protagonists emerge. First up, Joan of Arc, born around 1412 in a small village. She was just a teenager when she began hearing divine voices. Saint Michael, Saint Catherine, and Saint Margaret. They gave her an impossible mission: drive the English out of France and see the Dauphin Charles crowned as king in Reims. Imagine the scene: a teenage girl, illiterate, with no military experience, walking into the royal court and telling the heir to the throne that God sent her to lead his armies. It sounds like madness, but her conviction was so powerful, so unshakable, that she convinced them. On the other side of the English Channel, about a century earlier, we have William Wallace. We don't know as much about his early life, but he was likely a member of the gentry, not a common peasant as some movies suggest, but certainly not a high-ranking noble. His story ignites after English soldiers allegedly murder his love, Marion Braidfoot, fueled by revenge and a burning desire for Scottish independence. Wallace begins a guerrilla campaign, rallying commoners and minor nobles to his cause. He wasn't hearing voices from heaven, he was listening to the cries of an oppressed nation. So how did they lead? Joan's leadership was built on faith. She was a spiritual and moral compass for the French army. Before her arrival, the French soldiers were demoralized, their Siege of Orléans a failing disaster. Joan rode into their camp, a banner of Jesus and Mary in hand, and everything changed. She wasn't a master strategist in the traditional sense, but she inspired something far more potent: belief. She convinced the soldiers they were fighting a holy war, that God was on their side. She cleaned up the camps, kicked out prostitutes, and demanded the men attend mass. Her presence was electrifying. She led from the front, taking an arrow to the neck at Orleans, and still returning to the fight to rally her troops for the final, victorious push. The Maid of Orleans became a living legend. Wallace's leadership was forged in fire and steel. His style was brutal, practical, and incredibly effective. He was a master of guerrilla warfare, using the Scottish terrain to his advantage, striking fast and melting away. But his crowning achievement was the Battle of Stirling Bridge in 1297. The English army was a professional, heavily armored force, far superior to Wallace's ragtag group of spearmen. Wallace waited, patiently, as the English cavalry began to cross a narrow bridge. Once a significant portion was trapped on the other side, he sprung the trap. The result was a massacre and a stunning victory for the Scots. It showed that a disciplined army of common men with long spears could defeat the supposedly invincible English knights. Wallace was a tactical genius, a warrior who led by example and raw courage. Let's compare their key victories. For Joan, it's undoubtedly the Siege of Orléans. This victory was a massive psychological turning point. It proved the English were not invincible and that Joan's divine mission was real. It shattered the aura of English dominance and paved the way for Charles VII's coronation, fulfilling the second part of her divine quest. This wasn't just a military win. It was a spiritual and political earthquake that re-energized the entire French cause. Following Orleans, she led a swift and brilliant campaign through the Loire Valley, securing more victories and clearing the path to Reims. For Wallace, Stirling Bridge was his masterpiece. It was a pure military victory, a masterclass in strategy and exploiting an enemy's arrogance. It elevated him from a rebel leader to the guardian of Scotland, ruling the country in the name of the exiled king. This victory didn't just give the Scots hope, it gave them their country back. For a time, it demonstrated that England's military might could be broken through clever tactics and sheer Scottish grit. While Joan's victory was a miracle that rallied a nation, Wallace's was a calculated act of defiance that proved a nation could fight for itself. But for every hero's rise, there is often a tragic fall. And here, their stories are hauntingly similar. Both were ultimately betrayed. After her string of successes, Joan's influence at court began to wane. The nobles and the king himself grew wary of her power and popular appeal. During a minor skirmish at Compiègne, she was captured by Burgundian soldiers, allies of the English. King Charles, the man she had crowned, made no effort to ransom or rescue her. He abandoned the girl who had saved his kingdom. The English, eager to discredit her, and the French king she legitimized, put her on trial for heresy. It was a sham trial, politically motivated from the start. Despite a brilliant and spirited defense, the verdict was a foregone conclusion. At just 19 years old, Joan of Arc was burned at the stake. Wallace's end was just as grim. His success at Stirling Bridge was followed by a devastating defeat at the Battle of Falkirk. The Scottish nobles, always jealous of his power, failed to fully support him. He was forced into hiding, a hunted man. In 1305, he was betrayed by a Scottish knight, John de Menteith, and handed over to the English. He was taken to London, subjected to a mock trial for treason, a charge he famously rejected, stating, "I could not be a traitor to Edward, for I was never his subject." His execution was designed to be a terrifying spectacle. He was hanged, drawn, and quartered, his body parts displayed across England and Scotland as a warning to all who would defy the English crown. So, let's talk about legacy. Who had the bigger impact? Joan's story is incredible. In just over a year, she completely reversed the course of the 100 Years' War. Her martyrdom only amplified her legend. 25 years after her death, a posthumous retrial cleared her name, and she was declared a martyr. Centuries later, she was canonized as a saint by the Catholic Church. Today, she is one of the patron saints of France, an enduring symbol of French nationalism, faith, and courage. Her impact was immediate, profound, and spiritually transcendent. She saved France, and in doing so, became an icon for the ages. Wallace's legacy is more complex. In the short term, his rebellion was crushed. He was executed, and Scotland was once again brought under English control. But the idea he fought for, the idea of an independent Scotland, did not die with him. His brutal martyrdom turned him from a failed rebel into a national hero. He inspired others, most notably Robert the Bruce, who would eventually pick up the torch and secure Scotland's independence at the Battle of Bannockburn. 9 years after Wallace's death, Wallace didn't win the war, but he lit the fuse. He became the embodiment of the Scottish struggle for freedom, a symbol of defiance against tyranny that resonates to this day. His famous cry of freedom, though likely a Hollywood invention, perfectly captures the spirit of his legacy. So, who wins this historical clash? It's tough. Joan's achievements feel more miraculous. She was a teenage girl who commanded armies, crowned a king, and saved her nation, all in about a year, driven by what she believed was the word of God. Her impact was swift and decisive. Wallace's fight was a longer, grittier struggle. He didn't achieve his ultimate goal in his lifetime, but his sacrifice inspired the eventual victory. If we judge by immediate success and the sheer improbability of their accomplishments, you have to give the edge to Joan of Arc. She achieved her stated goals. She turned the tide of a war and crowned her king. Her story is a perfect, tragic, and complete arc. But if we judge by the enduring power of an idea, Wallace's legacy is immense. He represents the timeless, universal struggle for freedom against a powerful oppressor. He lost every battle but the last one, the battle for hearts and minds that would echo through centuries. Ultimately, there were two sides of the same coin. Extraordinary individuals who rose from nothing to challenge empires. Joan was the holy fire, a divine spark that reignited a nation's soul. Wallace was the earthly storm, a force of nature that taught a nation how to fight for itself. One was a saint, the other a so-called savage, but both were patriots who changed the course of history. What do you think? Who was the more impactful leader, Joan of Arc or William Wallace? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this historical showdown, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more. See you next time.